So guys, as y'all know, we've been talking a lot on this channel about Christian Parker's new defensive scheme. We praised this thing so much, we hyped it up video after video. Got everybody excited about what this defense could look like this year. But now Greg Ellis, a former Cowboy who knows this locker room and this defense better than most of us, just came out and said this whole scheme could turn into a nightmare if Christian Parker don't focus on one thing. Now look, he might have a point, but that's not exactly the good news. Not for Christian Parker, not for this coaching staff, and definitely not for this team going into the season. So how right is he actually? Is this a real concern, or are we just getting ahead of ourselves? That's exactly what I'm breaking down for y'all today. What's up, Cowboys Nation? Welcome to the NFL Playbook Cowboys. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. So, let me start with what exactly Greg Ellis said. Basically, he said that this Christian Parker scheme can be a nightmare for the Cowboys because of the 3-4 switch. Now, I want to be clear, Ellis wasn't sitting there trashing Christian Parker's scheme. What he was saying is that any 3-4 switch, no matter how good the coordinator is, comes with real risk if the personnel don't match the system. His exact point was that the Cowboys needed to strategically build this roster with players who already have some 3-4 background. And if they didn't do that, if they just kept talented guys around and hoped it would translate, that's when things go sideways fast. That's when it becomes, in his words, a nightmare. So, the scheme itself is not a nightmare. It is actually the gap between the scheme and the personnel that make it a nightmare. You know, Ellis actually lived this exact situation in 2005. He knows the difference between a coordinator drawing up a good system on paper and that system actually surviving real NFL Sundays with the wrong players trying to execute it. So, what exactly is he worried about? He's worried about the two-gap elements of this new scheme. And look, for those of y'all who maybe don't live and breathe scheme talk like I do, let me break this down quickly so we're all on the same page before I give you my actual take. In a two-gap scheme, your defensive linemen, especially your tackles, they're not just shooting one gap and getting up the field as fast as they can. Instead, they're reading the blocker first, controlling two gaps at once, and then reacting to where the ball goes. It's more of a patient, physical, and hold your ground kind of technique. You'll hear guys talk about a 4-eye technique. That's when a lineman lines up on the inside eye of the offensive tackle, and then there's the straight-up 5 technique, which is lined up head up on the tackle itself. Both of those alignments are built for that 2-gap or gap and a half style of play. It's a lot of stacking blockers, shedding at the right time, and trusting your linebackers behind you to fill and make plays. Now, why does this matter for what Greg Ellis said? Because two-gap football lives and dies with your defensive tackles. If those guys can't hold the point of attack, if they get moved off the ball, the whole scheme starts to break down real quick, and that's exactly where his concern is coming from. And I get it, it's a totally different mindset for a defensive lineman. You're not just told to go make plays, you're told to be patient first, control your gaps first, and then go make the play once it comes to you. Some guys take to that naturally. Other guys fight it their whole career because it's just not how they're wired to play the position. So when we talk about this scheme working or not working, a huge part of that comes down to do you have the right kind of tackles, the right kind of temperament up front to actually execute it the way it's drawn up on the board. Now, let me tell you where Greg Ellis is coming from with this take, because I think his background actually explains a lot of it. He played under Parcells, and if you know anything about that era, that was a heavy two-gap system. And from what he's expressed, he did not enjoy playing in it. Makes sense too, because coming out of college, he was more of an upfield guy, somebody who wanted to shoot a gap and get after the quarterback, not sit back and read blots patiently. So I think it's fair to say, this take is coming from somebody who personally struggled in that exact style of defense. That doesn't make him wrong, but it does tell you where some of that hesitation is coming from. If you ask me, when a guy has lived through a scheme and it wasn't for him, that's going to color how he views it for other players too, even years later. Now, here's my honest take, and I know some of y'all are not going to want to hear this, but I actually think Greg Ellis is being a little more cautious than he needs to be here. Look, to be fair to him, he actually did name some of these new additions himself, guys like Otito Ogbania and Jonathan Bullitt. He pointed out that they bring some real 3-4 experience to this room. So it's not like he's completely out of the loop. Because the Cowboys have actually gone out and built personnel that fits this exact two-gap style. Guys like Osa Odigizua, Perion Winfrey, and Solomon Thomas, they are out of here. They are gone from this roster. And in their place, the Cowboys brought in guys like Jonathan Bullard and Otito Agbania, players who I genuinely believe were brought in specifically because they can handle that two-gap, hold the point of attack kind of role. And on top of that, you've still got Quinnen Williams in that room, a guy who can eat up blocks and control gaps at a high level. So, when I hear Greg Ellis bring up this concern, my honest reaction is, his worry isn't really about not knowing the roster. It's more about the fact that this whole switch is uncharted territory. Even he admitted that himself. And honestly, that's fair. Anytime you're asking guys to learn a brand new technique like this, there's going to be some growing pains no matter how good the fit looks on paper. This coaching staff built this roster with two gap traits in mind. They didn't just wake up one day and decided to run this scheme with the same personnel from last year. They went out and got guys who are actually suited for it. Now think about it this way, guys. If you're a coaching staff and you know you're switching your whole defensive identity, you're not going to just show up to camp and hope the old roster figures it out on the fly. You go out and you actively upgrade exactly what you're about to ask these guys to do. That's what I believe happened here. Moving on from Osa, Winfrey, and Solomon Thomas wasn't just about performance from a year ago. I think part of that was also about fit. Those guys were built more for an upfield, attack one gap style, and if you're pivoting the whole scheme, sometimes the fit just isn't there anymore, no matter how talented a guy is. Meanwhile, bringing in Jonathan Bullard and Otito, to me that reads like a front office that already saw this concern coming and tried to get ahead of it before the season even started. I also think about what we talked about with the 4-eye and 5 technique alignments earlier. Those tackles are going to be leaned on heavily in this defense, and from what I've seen and what I believe about this personnel group, I think they've got guys capable of playing that gap and a half style the coaching staff wants. It's not going to look flashy every single snap. Two-gap football rarely does, but if these tackles can hold their ground and let the linebackers fill behind them, this thing can actually work the way it's drawn up. So, where does that leave us on this whole nightmare talk? Look, I'm not going to sit here and act like Greg Ellis doesn't know football, because clearly he does, and he's earned the right to give his opinion on this defense. But I think this take has to be viewed through the lens of somebody who, even while giving credit to these new additions, still personally didn't love playing in a two-gap system himself back in the day. That history alone can make anybody a little more cautious about a switch like this, even when the personnel fit looks right on paper. So, guys, honestly, I think the concern is a little overblown. Is there a risk in switching schemes? Of course there is. Anytime you change how you're asking your front seven to play, there's an adjustment period. There's going to be some rough patches early on. But I don't think this is heading toward a nightmare. I think the Cowboys actually addressed this the right way by bringing in personnel built for this exact style of defense. If Bullard, Otito, and Quinnen Williams can do what I believe they're capable of doing up front, and if these tackles can control those gaps like the scheme demands, I think this defense surprises some people this year. Not in a bad way. And look, I get why fans latch onto a word like nightmare when it comes from a guy who actually played the game. It's a scary word, it grabs your attention, and it makes you want to click and find out more, which honestly is probably part of why it's spreading the way it is right now. But when you actually slow down and look past the headline and you look at who's actually in that room this year, the guys who were brought in the fit of this personnel with this specific scheme, I think the picture calms down a lot. This isn't the same group Greg Ellis might be picturing in his head when he says something like that. Roster construction takes time to show up on the field, and camp is going to tell us a lot more than any offseason quote ever will. So my message to y'all is stay patient with this thing. Watch how these tackles hold up once padded practices start. And don't let one strong word from a respected voice completely shape how you feel about this defense before it's even taken the field. So that's my full breakdown on this one, guys. Greg Ellis raised a fair point, and I respect him for putting his name behind an opinion instead of just staying quiet. But I think when you actually dig into who's on this roster right now, the picture looks a lot better than nightmare. Let me know down in the comments what you think. Do you agree with Greg Ellis here, or do you think this defense has what it needs to make this scheme work? As always, appreciate y'all for tapping in. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next one, and I'll catch y'all in the next video.